Hi, I'm Harry, and I'll be your host for today's episode of Lorong Product. So today, we'll be exploring the journey of a recent NUS graduate who has just commenced his product career from a completely different career path in mechanical engineering.
Turning into Lorong Product.
So for today, it is indeed an honor to introduce our guest, Elgin.
Hello. Hi everyone, I'm Elgin. I'm currently a business product manager here at Shopee, and I'm here to share with you guys about what it's like being a product manager.
Alright, so thanks for your intro, Elgin. So yeah, I think we've known each other for 10 plus years. Yeah, but for the benefit of our viewers, could you briefly share with us how your journey has started off in NUS?
Sure. Yeah, so I entered NUS in 2019, and so I was entering into a mechanical engineering background. And so I guess why I wanted to study mechanical engineering as any PCME student in JC,
Okay.
I didn't really have a lot of choices, or I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so I thought engineering would be the next best thing for me. But I guess throughout my university journey, I felt like there were other things I wanted to explore, and that's why I ended up in product management today.
Oh, I think that's pretty cool. I think based on what I've heard from our mutual friends, especially, it seems that you had quite the active university life. So, what would you say were some of your key highlights during your time in NUS?
I think I really enjoyed my time staying in a hall in NUS. So I was from Kent Hall, so I did quite a few different activities. And then some of my other enrichment programs, I guess you could call it, would be a NOC program, a NUS Overseas College, where I went to Munich for 6 months, interning at a startup based in Munich, Germany. And I think that was one of the most enriching experiences that I had in NUS.
All right, that's interesting. So, maybe besides those, what would you say would be your biggest regrets that you probably didn't get to explore while in NUS?
I think maybe I didn't try as hard into doing some of the sports in NUS when it comes to intra university activities, because I just was not good enough and I was focusing on other things. But that would have been a really cool experience for me. But I guess I didn't have the opportunity to do so.
Okay, maybe what sport would you want to play?
I would say football, but then I don't think I'm good enough for that lah.
Oh, it's okay. I mean, understandably, the team NUS I think is quite stacked, especially for football, because understandably a lot of them they have been doing it since primary school. I think you may have known.
Yeah, that's definitely not my thing at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. So Elgin, so before we dive deeper into your motivations behind pivoting towards PM, could you briefly share what your past internship experiences were?
So I started out internship with a engineering company that was part of my graduation requirements with mechanical engineering, and that was when I decided to try something new. And so I did an internship, product internship with Ninja Van, and that's when I went on to my NOC experience in Munich, Germany with Hey Charge, and then lastly I did a product management internship with Singtel right before my graduation.
Okay, cool. I think it's interesting that you mentioned Ninja Van as your first internship. So, out of curiosity, why and how did you secure this opportunity? And from here on, why do you choose to pivot towards PM despite initially studying engineering?
I think my biggest gripe with my engineering internship was that I wasn't really very comfortable or fully interested in doing something so technical. And that's when I kind of juggled with the idea of trying to go into something tech related. And so as I was scouring the net for potential job opportunities and internships, I think I came across something that was maybe product adjacent, not exactly the Ninja Van role. And that's when I thought, maybe I should try something new aside from what I just did in my engineering company. And when I was applying, I read up on all the job descriptions and things like that, and they had a lot of stakeholder management, a bit of product related job skills that I felt that that was something I might not have at that point of time. And that's when I started to read up a little bit more about what it would actually take to become a product manager and apply for a product management internship.
Okay, that's interesting. So maybe through your experience, right, were there any challenges or obstacles that you faced while trying to pursue PM?
I think definitely when applying for internships and trying to get my resume up to standard for what a product management internship would require was definitely quite challenging given my previous experience wasn't super related. But I think the way to actually do it, coming out not from a technical background or something that's related to product management, would be to kind of highlight certain skills and maybe highlight certain projects that you did so far that could actually be related to product management, and actually kind of phrase certain job experiences or skills that you have done so far to kind of suit product management. So it can range anything from stakeholder management, being able to gather requirements, understanding customer problems and things like that, which was some of the things that I actually did in an engineering internship, but maybe wasn't the main focus.
Okay, I see. So, yeah, thanks for sharing about your experience. Yeah, I'm sure many of us will be encouraged to make a similar career switch, especially given that product, I think, as you may know, is quite difficult to break into lah, because normally you will require quite a lot of experience in like maybe like data or like software or maybe business or marketing before you eventually break into your first product role, or at least that's what I've heard from my friends. Yeah. So yeah, if you caught our previous episode, one of our previous guests was actually Chisin, who you may have known previously also. She was also studying civil engineering, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, but she also managed to successfully pivot into PM. So for engineering people like yourself, what would you advise these students?
I think like what you just mentioned, being in product management will require you to have certain skill sets, like you mentioned data, being business, marketing, or even design and things like that. So if you are actually an engineering student who is quite interested in roles like this, I think it would be very good to, brush up on these product adjacent skills where you can actually have some form of background before you enter the role or while interviewing. You can show that you have certain levels of interest getting into these roles that would be quite similar to product roles, or even within the product management roles themselves. And so I think people who aren't studying maybe let's say computer science or business or even like marketing, a very good thing to do would actually to bolster your resume by doing such projects that can gain skills like this, or even doing courses like UI UX and things like that. I think those will really help.
Okay, so speaking of UI UX, maybe out of curiosity lah, what were some of the previous experiences you've had, like maybe Figma, or like were there any other softwares that you kind of used before?
I think generally a lot of startups like to kind of use Figma as their early stage mockups, as well as skeleton designs for some of their software development processes. And I think those were some of the things I was exposed to early on when I was definitely in my startup in Munich, Germany, as well as Ninja Van. I had some of the opportunities to work with some of the designers as well as product managers that handled some of these softwares and the kind of like building and design stages of how you actually utilize these softwares. And while at a point in time I wasn't fully well versed in them, it just gave me the level of exposure that I required to further use these skill sets in like my future projects and things like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so just to recap, for the benefit of the audience, so Elgin was actually one of the first batch of our participants lah for our very first iteration of PM1101E, exposure to product management. So this was our flagship program that we ran for 6 weeks, where we invited like guest instructors who were working full time in the industry. So we had people like Jason, head of product management at Trust Bank, as well as Hazel, who was a product manager at Foodpanda. So we had the luxury of inviting them over to teach them to get them to like teach this 6 week course lah. So maybe Elgin, could you reflect on your motivations behind joining PM1101E, and how was your experience with us?
I think mainly why I really wanted to join PM1101E was mainly like I had some idea that there were some product related clubs in other universities, and given that this NUS product club was just formed at this point of time, I really wanted to be a part of this whole journey of being a part of product club, as well as being exposed to other product people within the industry. And I think those was one of my main draws joining this experience. And I think I really managed to gain what I really wanted to from the whole course and experience, and working with all these experienced people. I think one thing that I really thought of or really wanted to actually gain exposure to before I applied for it was that I wanted to see how experienced product managers describe what product management is, aside from just like what I've gained or learned from through online videos, as well as online courses and things like that. And I haven't really had the opportunity opportunity to actually speak to some of these product managers in person. So I think that was like a very good avenue for me to do that.
Okay, so it looks like you've benefited quite a fair amount, especially given that, you mentioned during your time you didn't have this kind of stuff. So hopefully we did something good for you lah through this 6-week program. Yeah. So yeah, speaking of which, since you joined PMR 101E like last semester, we'd like to find out if there were any key takeaways from our program that you'd like to share with us.
I think definitely, in general, the program itself was very structured. That allowed me to kind of like refine the kind of product thinking that I had before the joining, and then after it was a like much more structured kind of process where I could think through certain problems, how I were to iterate a solution that I want to bring forth when it comes to technology, software development and things like that. And so one thing that PM 101E I felt gave me was the ability to actually go forth during certain interviews, especially case interviews for a product, where you actually talk through a certain problem that they pitch to you, and use certain frameworks and mindsets that the experienced product managers used when they gave the course. I think those were some things that I really lacked before actually going on to my job search for a full-time role. And those were some things that I really tried to hone my skills in during the program and make sure I came out of the program at least a better product manager, job searcher than before.
Okay, so speaking of case interviews, and you were mentioning like your job search, right? So, and then you eventually ended up at Shopee, right? I mean, out of curiosity, if you don't mind, could you like briefly share how the process was like, maybe at Shopee or like similar companies?
Yeah, I think while I was interviewing or applying for a lot of roles for my full-time role, I came across quite a few kind of case study interviews as well as product interview questions that uh, were slightly less common than I had expected while studying. And so some tips I guess would be to actually formulate some of your answers beforehand, kind of practice with other people, talking to them how you actually go ahead and iterate a certain product or explain to people, what's your favorite product and why. So I think these questions, while you do see them online quite often when you're searching for, what a product management interview is going to be like, I think actually going through the process and saying what you want to formulate beforehand would help you make it a much more convincing answer to your interviewer, as well as trying to show them that you actually know what you're talking about rather than just from reading off what a script you found online. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so I like the question that you mentioned, what is your favorite product and why? Because fun fact, when we interview people to join our OCOM, we like to ask the question a lot. Actually, not just for OCOM, for our industrial attachments and for PMR 1E also. So, yeah, if you guys applied before, you all know what I mean lah. Yeah. Okay, so we know that you had a wealth of industry experiences in product. So you were mentioning your NOC experience or maybe Ninja Van, and then now that you're at Shopee, right, as a full-timer. Yeah, but I think some people, they think that doing an internship and doing a full-time role is kind of the same thing. So maybe for the benefit of our audience, how do you think is different working as a full-timer compared to when you were interning previously?
I think definitely as an intern in the product space, you are not exactly holding the full responsibility of the product. And so as an intern, you're mainly handling certain responsibilities that are within the product itself. So, maybe you're doing data related queries or even like case interviews and things like that with potential customers. And so you are not fully aware of what certain effects on the product would have or external things affecting the product. But I guess as a full-timer now, you have to fully take the responsibility of what's happening to your product, fully understanding what's the effects of certain things happening outside of the product and what would the roadmap look like in the next few quarters and things like that. And so that's something I'm still getting the hang of and would definitely be a skill that someone fresh out of college wouldn't have. So that's something that most interns would have to pick up as they transition to full-time.
Okay, maybe just to follow up on that. So maybe either in Shopee or your previous experiences, what do you think were some of the more memorable or interesting projects that you've taken?
I think I wouldn't mention right now because I only joined for like less than a month. But I think something that I did, I really enjoyed doing back when I was in my NOC company in HRH was actually trying to help design some of the mobile applications web page, like the landing page and things like that. Because at that point in time, I think I didn't have a lot of design experience.
Okay.
And so given that it was a very small startup, we didn't have a lot of people working on it. So just with one product designer, And so part of the work was helping sketch up some of the skeleton using Figma and things like that, and trying to iterate some of the buttons and page transitions and things like that, which was something that was very new to me.
Okay.
So that was very interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so it seems like your experience is more towards the UI UX design kind of thing. So I think we all know that product is very like diverse, right? You need to know like a lot of different skills. So what would you say is like maybe one or two key skills that you think you will still need to hone on or will want to pick up still?
I think definitely to hone on would be stakeholder management. So I think whether you are intern or whether you are full-timer, you definitely have to manage expectations of different people that you're working with, whether it's developers or whether it's the business team. And so having the ability to make sure things happen and you compete and meet certain deadlines, those are how you manage your stakeholders. And then what things that I would think will be very important for people to have when you try to enter the product management space is at least understanding some of the technical requirements of some of the products that you're working on, because without that you wouldn't be able to actually speak to your developers well, wouldn't understand the troubles that they're facing, and some of the technical depth that would require certain features would require in the roadmap. Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of requirements, right? So one of the key components of our PM111 course is actually a product requirements document lah. So this is apparently a very common document that's being drafted when PMs actually plan out the features for a particular application. So you mentioned that you've worked at like startups before and now you're like working for Shopee. So I mean, out of curiosity, how often is it being used when it comes to planning out different features for like different applications?
I think
Maybe like startups as well as either bigger companies also.
I think different companies operate slightly differently. So back in the startup that I was at, I think PRDs weren't really used very widely because they operated slightly differently with their product. I think in Ninja Van, those were some things that they did use. So product managers will have to draft out product requirement documents to push on to the developers eventually, and then that's how they design their sprints and whatnot with their Scrum Masters. Currently in Shopee, because I'm a business product manager, I actually work on business requirement documents, which then get pushed to product requirement documents by the feature product managers. But those are just the different quirks that different companies do.
Yeah, so once again, Elgin, thanks a lot for your time. I know you're a busy man because you're working full-time right now. But yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen you. So yeah, maybe before we end off this video, would you like to say anything to our viewers?
I think definitely do come down and join all the NUS Product Club events and initiatives. I hear there are a lot of interesting technical interviews / workshop trainings that you can come down for. And especially for people who would like to enter the product management space, do continue to network and ask around of what it takes to become a PM. I think that will definitely help you as you're currently applying or writing better resumes and things like that.
Thanks for coming for today's episode of Lorong Product. To find out more about previous episodes, click here.